Hello, everyone. We're going to start on time. So I'm going to ask everybody to have a seat because there's a door prize. So if everybody could get in a seat, they'll be eligible for the door prize. So we're waiting for Kathy and Liz to have a seat. Maybe somebody could give them a poke. Well, I want to welcome everybody for coming. It truly makes me happy for you to be here. Truly does. And to start things off, Margene donated a door prize, and I'm going to pass the mic to her and let her give you the details.
Okay, the details are, first of all, if you're sitting next to an empty chair, not only can you check your chair, but you can check the chairs to your right. And if you'll look at the right side of your chair, the front leg, and if it has 3 airplane stickers on it, you won. But once again, if you're sitting next to empty chairs, you can check those chairs also to your right. It's on the leg of the chairs. You're getting closer, lady. Yes, you do. Uh-huh.
Come on up and get it.
Yeah, come up and maybe introduce yourself. And
Deb Sarver from Cleveland. I'm a friend of Karen's. We used to motorcycle together.
Okay, so that's why she pulled your name. So again, welcome to everybody. I'd like to do a brief introduction to Kathy Kraus. We're going to start on time, and we're going to end on time. So if there's any questions afterwards, please come up to talk to Kathy personally, and the people that have to leave, feel free to leave. Kathy Kraus is a Medina resident that taught art in the school system, most notably Cloverleaf schools. Kathy was also an architectural illustrator and painter of large public murals. These pursuits took her all over the world. Some of the murals were in different foreign countries, and she can talk more on that. Now Kathy's passion is as a reenactor, especially for women's history, and she does an emphasis on Ohio women's history, which this talk is going to be about. Regarding this program, she got to meet 2 WASPs from Ohio and got to listen to their stories. She uses these stories in her presentation. And again, questions are afterwards. And I'd like to say, this really is a donation, a fundraiser. So there's a donation basket up here at the end, and there'll be one in the back with Margene Mitchell. So feel free to donate, but if you're not able to, you're welcome here anyway. Offer up a blessing for the church and a blessing for Kathy. So without further ado, Kathy Kraus.
Thank you. I guess, Eric, can you hear? Yeah. Okay, we're trying to get the microphone squared away. I'm happy to be here. And Karen and I have become very well acquainted over the subject of history and history of Ohio. And we have been sharing some books and some thoughts, both of us, for quite some time now. And I told her that when I was a teacher of art, I never thought that the discipline would cross over to history, but it does. And I proved it in the 35 years of teaching that art doesn't stay just in the art room. It goes into every discipline, math, science, and everything. So after I became an art teacher for many, many years, I wanted to have the dream of becoming an illustrator in the field of archaeology. And that's what took me in many parts of the world to discover bones in Ethiopia and other places and have a very Indiana Jones lifestyle. And some of the worst places in the world, and survival was part of that. But I was only 40 then, just let you know. And now that I'm going to be 80 this year, I think to myself, I said, I gotta keep fooling people thinking I'm 26 to 50, so I'll work on that. But you know how God works in strange ways. And he has worked in my life a long time. And not only has he worked he's brought me the people I talk about. And they've been amazing stories. In 1995, I had the privilege of meeting Jeanette Jenkins. She was the aunt of one of my classmates from Miami University. And he said to us, friends, at the reunion, he said, let's stop and see my aunt. She's got some neat stories to tell us. And when we did, I never realized that 40 years later, I would start talking about her and remember what she told me. Why, I don't know, but that's the way that is. And that's who I'm going to talk about today. But secondly, I'm part of the Cleveland Air and Space Museum as well. And I had said to them, I would like to meet a WASP pilot. And one day, one called up. And she said, I understand you want to meet a WASP pilot. I was one. And I said, where do you live? She said, Norwalk. I said, Norwalk? That's within driving distance of Medina. I was thinking she was going to say, I'm in East Texas or something or other. Anyway, that is a little bit of a feature I will tell you about Thelma Miller. Two of the most gratifying things here, both have passed away, but obviously, World War II pilots here. But Thelma, her family called me and asked me to be her at her last public visit to the library in Norwalk. And so people from Medina and all over came to see Thelma sitting in the chair while I told her life story. And it was a very tear-jerking moment for all of us, but lots of laughs as well. Both of these ladies, Jeanette flew for 60 years. Thelma flew for 40 years. And these are their story. So as I begin, I am now going to be Jeanette Jenkins. I'm from Dover, Ohio, and I was born in 1917. There was nothing going on in Dover, Ohio in 1917. Not much. I went to Tuscarora School, and I was given, when I graduated, the Industrial Arts Award. A woman getting an Industrial Arts Award? Evidently, I had a knack for tools and machinery. And the boys knew it. And they thought it was okay that I got that award because they thought I deserved it. Well, in those days, there wasn't anything about flying being talked about a whole lot. But I would go on Sunday afternoon after church out to Cleaver Field, a small little airfield right there just outside of town. And as I would get there, I would sit and look and watch all the different planes fly over, small planes. I saw people taking flying lessons. And I said to myself, I'm not going to tell my mother. I am going to take flying lessons. And she's not going to know about it because I will make it very secretive. And so I did. I signed up for flying lessons at Cleaver Field. I was in my 20s, working at Timken Company in the office. Well, it was pretty exciting because out of 50 men in the class, I was the only woman. And I got a scholarship because of it. So it was $250 to take flying lessons. And I got to go for free. I would not tell my mom because she would have been very upset with me learning how to fly planes in those days. But for weeks and weeks, for a long time, I would watch the skies for the planes. And then, gradually, I became one of them. And when I would fly that little plane all over the place. And I would even drop nickels out when we were having fundraisers, and people would watch all of our antics up there. And, of course, I like to fly upside down, backwards, and any which way. That's why Mom didn't know it was me. As time went by, I was flying one day, happened to be December 7th, 1941. And I was circling the little airfield at Cleaver Field, and I came down just after I had said, I am going to learn how to fly this plane the best I can. And I told Mr. Cleaver, what is it you want me to learn the most? He said, I want you to know what to do if the engine fails. And I said, what do we do? So he gave me all the secrets of how to fly that plane, and if the engine failed, I was to absolutely try everything he told me. I had one chance to do it. So I went up, I took the plane, was flying around, doing all my little tricks, and all of a sudden the engine did fail. And I had to do what he told me. And as I came sailing down, perfectly, landed like a feather. And I got known for that. I landed perfectly, just like a feather. And I run up to Mr. Cleaver. Mr. Cleaver, I did it. The engine failed, and I actually made it. And what did you think? He said, I missed it. I was on the phone. I said, well, unbelievable situation. Well, as the weeks went by and the war was underway, it seemed to be my dream of telling that story got a little bigger. You may not know this, but Amelia Earhart was my favorite person. And one day she had come to my school, and she looked at all of us in the gym, and I felt that her eyes looked at mine as she said, you girls could learn how to fly. And I thought, Amelia Earhart told me I could do this. Well, Amelia was also doing flying lessons, but she had a best friend, Eleanor Roosevelt. Nobody knows this too much, you know. And so one day, when Amelia was speaking in Washington, Eleanor invited her to the White House for a dinner. So the ladies got all dressed up with their furs and their pearls and their long white gloves. And they had this beautiful dinner going on. Eleanor leans over to Amelia and she says, you know, I haven't learned how to fly at night yet, and I really want to do that. And she said, well, you know, we'll have to see about working that in one day. Well, as they were sitting chatting with all the other guests, the dinner was ending. And Amelia leans over to Eleanor and she says, you want to take a ride? And she says, of course. Well, let's go to the airfield in my brand new car. I just got it today. She said, yes, we'll go. And we get to the airport, we'll fly my plane. So security was not top-notch in those days. So the two ladies get in Eleanor's car, and they drive to the airport, and they get in the little plane, and they flew all over Washington looking at the beautiful lights. And they had their beautiful furs on and their pearls and their long white gloves. And they had a fine time in that cockpit. And she got to see how Washington looked from the air. And it looked like diamonds in the sky. And how special that was for her. Well, she told Amelia, you know, it won't be too long when my lessons, by the way, my husband does not know I'm taking flying lessons. He doesn't even know that I can drive. So, you know, not a lot of communication there. President was busy. And so, anyway, they came down from the sky, landed perfectly at the airfield. And then the Secret Service shows up. Mrs. Roosevelt, what are you doing? How could you be doing this? Nobody knew what and they got all out of shape there. And Eleanor said, we just went for a little ride. Didn't tell her in what. Well, they got done, and then Eleanor and Amelia went in to have their favorite dessert, angel food cake with pink cloud frosting. That is a true story, and it's hard to believe that the two were best friends and flew planes. So Jeanette said, I can't believe what's going on in the world right now. I want to do something. In the newspaper was an article. The government wanted 25,000 women who could fly and ferry planes, and they could ferry them from airport to airport, not to be in combat, but to get the planes off the assembly line to the bases. And in many cases, be the first person to try flying that plane. So, I applied. 25,000 women applied to be Air Force service pilots. 1,076 were taken, and I was one. I was one of 20 from Ohio. What a state. Everything happens in Ohio. First in everything. First woman to run for president. Yeah, well, I'll tell you that another day. But the point is how exciting I was to have been chosen. Well, of course, I told my mother I was going out. I didn't come back for 2.5 years. She didn't know the story there. We got to a place you do not want to put on your vacation list called Sweetwater, Texas. Bad place. All desert. We would get in the planes in the morning. We had to take the snakes and spiders out of the cockpit. I know, really tough job. And then we had to watch where we walked. We had to make sure our shoes were cleared out before we got in them in the morning. One of the things we enjoyed was coffee. We had to have perms for our hair so we wouldn't have to detail with that. We wore red lipstick, though. That was important to us. It's the only thing we had time to put on. These were our men's clothes. We got men's leather jackets, men's shirts, buttoning them the wrong way, of course, for us ladies. We had men's ties. We had the aviator scarf. We had patches on our sleeves. We had our insignia. And we have also all these little details, including a map in the pockets. This was designed by Walt Disney. It was called Fifinella. She was a little gremlin, and she picture of her hung over our Quonset. She was our insignia that we looked at. We looked for her all the time. And then, of course, we got wasp pins, aviator pins. We felt very important. The men's clothes were not attractive. At that time, we had 25-inch waists. The men had 35. Our clothes fit like bags. But we didn't care. We wanted to be for God, country, and the thrill of it all. We were all in our 20s. And all of us girls left our homes, our family, our sweethearts, our husbands, to do this mission of ferrying planes across the United States. 120 bases, 60 million miles, and 19,000 planes. That was our record. Pretty impressive. I got chosen to be an instrument pilot. And that was the first of instrument flying, and I was the first person to be able to do that. My mechanical skills at the high school paid off. We also had to repair our planes. If we had to land in a cornfield or something, we had to be able to fix our planes. So we knew quite a bit about airplanes. We flew the AT-6s, which was a small plane. We flew P-51s, B-17s, B-29s, anything in between. We flew every plane the Air Force had. Often, we were the first ones to fly that plane off the assembly line. Sadly, 38 women died doing this, and I wrote this book that tells about the 38 women who died. And if you want to see something like this, with the bravery of all of my friends who flew, this story, the stories of all of them, beautiful young ladies. I will tell you one story. Cornelia Fort. Cornelia was a debutante from Tennessee, a well-off young lady, very beautiful in every way, often on magazines. We became pinup girls for some people. Like Life magazine often photographed us. We thought we were pretty smart looking in our aviation clothes. Cornelia was one of the best pilots. And she happened to be flying on December 7th, 1941 in Hawaii. And as she was flying her small trainer plane, giving instructions to a new student, she noticed hundreds of Japanese planes flying over her head. She did not realize at the time they were all above her. And with what she saw from the cockpit, all the planes up the way bombing Pearl Harbor. She landed in a pineapple field because she didn't know where else to go because the whole world was being shot to pieces. She lived to tell about that story, and she wrote this poem. And she said, "As long as our planes fly overhead, the skies of America are free. And that's what all of us everywhere are fighting for. And that we, in a very small way, are being allowed to help keep the sky free is the most beautiful thing I've ever known. I, for one, am profoundly grateful that my one talent, my only knowledge, flying, happens to be of use to my country when it's needed. And that's all the luck I hope to have." But as luck ran out, and she was in a mid-air collision and died, and her life became a legacy of an airport named after her in Tennessee called the Cornelia Ford Airport. These 38 women that were friends of mine, I have lived every story. I wrote this book about them. And I felt these people made such a difference in their lives and in their states. And they cared so much for God, country, and the thrill of it all. They often would say in the break room, "Oh, I'd be doing this even if I didn't get paid for it." They got paid, as we all did then, $250 a month. The men got $350 a month. Wonder why? So Cornelia, very near and dear. And the other interesting thing I wanted to show you was, just to let you know, because I was so busy flying and being an instructor, we also were known for beauty, you know. We wore turbans. These ordinarily were of our towels that we wrapped our hair in. Durbin, our squadron commander, named our group the Durbin's Turbans. And that's because we had longer hair and it would get caught in the machinery. So he said we had to band up our hair and wear turbans. And the next thing you know, at Higbee's and May Company, turban hats were being sold in our honor. And so this is an original Higbee's turban from 1940s, and that was special. We also had our leather caps, which were really comfortable, kept our heads warm. We had goggles for day and night, had to have those. And we had wintry hats, just like this, with a little fur inside. And so it just, well, these were not terribly glamorous, ladies. These just were practical. I'll tell you what wasn't practical, trying to drink coffee and then where are you going to use the restroom? There just wasn't any opportunity for things like that. So these bits of attire were part of our routine clothes. We were up at dawn. We'd get in our cockpits, dust off the snakes and spiders, and get on our way to all over the country and hope we made it back. And if we did, they would have a steak waiting for us and a cup of coffee. And sometimes, oh, we would be so tired, we would just drink the coffee and go to bed. It's just the way it was. But we were thrilled to be doing it. Well, one day, Lieutenant Colonel Tibbets came into the break room. You may have heard of Lieutenant Colonel Tibbets. He flew the Enola Gay. You may know of that plane. He came to us, and he said, any of you girls have any four-engine flying experience? And we said, not really. Most of us have flown planes that have two engines, and why? What's the issue? Well, he said, it seems to be we've had a lot of accidents with this B-29 bomber, and the men don't want to fly her. And we said, the men don't want to fly her. That's a problem here. We will fly her. So Dora and Dee Dee, my best friends, got up in the cockpit. And there they are with Lieutenant Colonel Tibbets, and they flew the B-29. Now, he said to them, this problem with this plane is it catches fire as it takes off. Well, what I'm telling you to do, you just tether the engine, use the extinguisher, take it down a little bit, and you'll be fine. Okay. So here we were, the size of, who's the smallest lady in the room here? Whoever is the smallest lady, it would be about the size of my buddies Dora and Dee Dee, although I was small too, I was 5'2". But the point is, they started to fly. They, sure enough, as they got up there, the engine catches on fire, cockpit area. They had to use the extinguisher, and then they started to tether the engine and bring it down. And as they did, fire went out, and they kept on flying. And they flew that B-29 bomber right into the airfield with Tibbets on the plane and landed. And all the young pilots are standing there. Well, how'd she fly, sir? And he said, I didn't fly her. The girls did. Well, that was not going to be holding water at the time. So the men said, well, if the girls can do it, we can do it. We'll get up there, we'll fly her. And as you know, they did. And the Enola Gay did its mission and bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The girls took all kinds of time doing all these things, learning how to do all the mechanical things on the planes. And of course, appearing in magazines because they were kind of idols at the time for other young ladies to learn to fly. But the sad part about this is, as the war went on and people started to talk more and more about veteran status and so forth, they said, well, you know, I think what's amazing, we aren't considered veterans. We're just ladies flying planes. It wasn't until 1979. Barry Goldwater said, you women have been of major service to our country, and we need to have an active Congress to make you veterans. And so they did. And then, it wasn't until 2010, think about this now, we got the Congressional Medal of Honor. Now, Dora's the one that flew that B-29 first. She said, as Air Force service pilots, we shared the wonders of flight, the spiritual uplifting of exploring God's heavens, the beauty as seen by eagles and by pilots, and the intangibles bind us together forever. For them, no words exist. When invaders threatened our shores, we came to the aid of our country in war. From protected homes and loving families, we came. We offered ourselves, our skills as pilots, and as all wars, we offered our lives. And 38 of us paid that price. We remember them, these young Air Force service pilots who died during World War II. And soon we too will fly beyond the dark, towering cumulus. We'll join them in sun-speckled reaches of space at altitudes we've never dreamed of. And there our planes will be infallible, our engines won't fail, our aerobatics will cut out incredible figures across the face of heaven, and we won't be afraid. We'll join those who have preceded us, and our joy will be forever. And they thought about that. How brave, how wonderful, and what spirit these ladies had. So as Jeanette and as I am Jeanette today, I'm mentioning to you these things because they are true stories. They are part of history. They are not taught in the schools. But on these posters over here, for example, if you come up afterwards, you will see what I've talked about today. Amelia and Eleanor, you will see Jeanette, as she looked when she flew at Avenger Field. Fifinella, you'll see Tebbets, you'll see our attire, and you'll see us sitting on the wings of planes, having our pictures taken, and how thrilling it was. I went on with my life after the service, and I lived the rest of my life in my house on First Street in Dover, Ohio. One day, when I was 60, I decided to side my house. It was an extremely high 2-story house. And I rigged up my scaffold, and I got up there, and I put the siding on. And the newspaper comes out and says, Jeanette, why are you up on a scaffold doing siding? And I told them, well, height didn't bother me. And I was mechanically skilled, and I thought I could side my own house. And I did. I also sat on the front porch, and little children would come visit, and I would tell them stories of how I flew planes and how I was the first woman to fly with instruments. I would tell them how exciting it was to be a pilot, but how important it was to be a woman pilot. And although very little recognized and remembered, every once in a while I would close my eyes and look at the sky and say, I think today's a great day to fly. I'm going down to Cleaver Field, and I'm going to get in the cockpit, and I'm going to fly all around Ohio. In fact, I think I'm going to call some of my other pilot friends from other states, and we'll meet in Nebraska for lunch. Now, one day, somebody said, I think we should go to Russia. Let's take a little visit. We'll get a few of us together. So we got over to Russia, and we met other women pilots from the Russian Air Force. They were covered in medals, all over, both sides, all kinds of medals. The women in Russia flew combat. We did not. We flew ferrying planes. We said, how did you get all those medals? And they said, well, where's yours? Well, our government didn't give us any. In fact, we weren't considered veterans at that time yet. So we were kind of told in late 1944, we don't need you anymore. You girls can go home. Go back to your jobs, your families, your husbands, your sweethearts, or whoever else. But you can take your uniforms with you if you want, but we don't need you anymore. And our hearts were broken. We hugged each other. We said farewells. And I decided I would start writing a newsletter and keep in touch with all my pilot girlfriends. And so I did. For the rest of my life, I would press flowers and write thank you notes and birthday cards. And I would keep a little newsletter going so we all knew where everybody was and what everybody was doing. And then we knew every year there'd be a reunion in Sweetwater, Texas, our favorite place, and we would come from all over the country and reunite and get back in the cockpit one more time. And I flew for 60 years. I mentioned that, but I think I would have flown longer. My eyesight was getting a little failing, but I still tried to fly. Well, Jeanette passed away when she was 84 years old. When I went to the burial spot and pay my respects to her and put a special flag by her grave, I thought about the location of the grave was facing Cleaver Field, looking right at the joy of her life. And she had one other joy, somebody you may have heard of, John Glenn. You've heard of John Glenn. He trained at Cleaver Field, and Jeanette was part of his training. And one day, the Smithsonian came, and they said, we need John Glenn's records because he's very famous now. And nobody knew where the records were, but I did. I took care of the secretarial work at Cleaver Field. So I said, well, you'll have to wait till my lunch break, and I'll go over, because I worked at Timken at the time, and they were careful about our time cards. So I went over there, and I got all the records of John Glenn, including a letter he wrote to me personally when we had our reunion dinner one year. Dear Jeanette, he said, I'm going to be coming to our reunion dinner, but you asked about my biography. I guess you have to look it up in the Smithsonian now, in encyclopedias, because, well, it's a little long. And when I was doing the research, I found the letter. I had the actual letter, signed by John Glenn. As time went by, many years, and the Cleaverfield people called me to come down and be Jeanette for the community and be honored by talking about her in her hometown. And they hung little model airplanes all over the ceiling of the dining room. It was extremely sentimental to meet people who knew Jeanette Jenkins, who were friends with her, who were the children that sat on the steps with her and heard her stories, and how near and dear it all was. And I still, when I go down to Dover, I still go up to the field and look at the Cleaver field and think she was one of the pioneers of aviation. And she was from Ohio. Now, I do want to just take a couple minutes here to tell you about Thelma. Thelma was from Norwalk. She joined the Women's Air Force Service pilots in 1944. And she was also very mechanical. And she learned to fly at a young age also, and then was taken into the WASP unit as well. And when she invited me to her house, she gave me pictures that I had blown up. She gave them to me out of her album. She took these pictures and said, here, you take these and tell about the story. And so I had them enlarged so you could see them. And she said, we had a grand time. We flew everything. We got to be such close friends. And I like thinking about how we'd line up for photos and how all of us from Ohio would get together. And we were proud of the fact we were from Ohio. Well, we said, Ohio is a major place. Not only presidents have come from here, but like I say, the first woman who ran for president was from here, from Ohio, and several aviators. How special was that? So that is Thelma's little story, and Thelma also flew the B-17s as well. Some of these pictures show some of the planes, and you see the women dressed just like men, because they wore the men's attire. And lastly, I will read this last poem. This is read at every WASP's funeral, and it's a hard one for me to get through, but I'll hold tight. It was written by one of the WASP pilots. Her name was Kit, and she says, she's not dead, she's only flying higher, higher than she's flown before. And earthly limitations will hinder her no more. There's no service ceiling or any fuel range. There's no anoxia or need for an engine change. Thank God that now her flight can be to heights her eyes have scanned, where she can race with comets and buzz the rainbow span. She's universal like courage and love and hope, and all free sweet emotions of vast and godly scope. Understand a pilot's fate is not the thing she fears, but rather the sadness left behind and your tears. So all you loved ones, dry your eyes. It's wrong you should grieve. She would love your courage more now. And she would want you to believe she's not dead. She's flying higher, higher than she's ever flown. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much to Kathy Kraus. History is so important. women's history, Black history, the unknown history, and thank you all for coming. We truly, truly appreciate it. So thanks again. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you for coming.
Feel free to come up and look at things and ask Kathy questions, whatever you need to do, or going off to other appointments. I think Linda's going to
Were
yoga.
there women of color flying at that time?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Really? That's amazing.
Well, you see how long it took them to get to this
I
point.
can't believe 2010 for the Congressional Medal.
And many of them were already gone.
How sad.
You remember Reagan saying,
Yeah, oh,
our government
Yes.
forgets?
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
very sad.
I'm
Thank you.
careful that not to say it always, but darn it,
Right,
they
right.
should have been recognized
So-
while they lived.
While they lived.
Because by 2010,
Most are gone. Yeah.
but you,